Today, I want to talk about the game Raid Shadow Legends. First off, this video is not sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends in any way, so these opinions are my own and more importantly, honest. Like many, I heard of this game from sponsorships on YouTube channels and I think it had a pretty big marketing push when the game first came out. I always thought it was funny to see the sponsored bits on YouTube because it always felt like the YouTuber or channel was going over talking points and probably barely touched the game itself. It did make me wonder, is Raid Shadow Legends actually a good game? So I did play the game on stream, and you can find links to the VODs below in the description of this video. One thing that pushed me into finally checking out Raid Shadow Legends is that one of my favorite mobile RPGs, Final Fantasy Record Keeper, ended its global version recently and wanted to fill that void. Also, I think it'd be good to compare the two since both are free-to-play RPG games, and I will touch on that later on in the video. Raid Shadow Legends is a free-to-play or freemium game that was developed and published by Israeli game developer Plarium Games. It was first released on mobile devices back in July 2018, and a PC port, which includes cross-platform progression, was released in January 2020. I did play this game for a good amount of time, however I feel like I didn't dive into every detail or mechanic of the game, but I wanted to go over the basic overview as well as what's good and bad about Raid Shadow Legends. So Raid Shadow Legends is your basic turn-based fantasy RPG. You build a party of champions and battle your way through dungeons. As you play the game, it's pretty much your typical RPG experience. You gain experience to level up your characters as well as receive drops, ranging from artifacts, which is the game's equipment, champions, and shards that you can use to summon more champions as well. With these characters, they range from common to legendary, with rare champions being much better to use. Also, rare champions have more skills and higher level caps, but you can also increase the level caps of more common champions as well by upgrading their ranks. Like many RPGs, there's a lot you can do to make your units stronger, such as upgrading equipment, or skills, or ascend them to increase their stats. Going more into the gameplay, there's the main campaign, which acts as the game's main story, and other dungeons where you can collect materials, some of them only available on specific days. There's also clan bosses, which are more like raid boss battles. I feel like that pretty much sums up the main parts of Raid Shadow Legends, although honestly I haven't checked out every aspect of this game, so I'm definitely leaving some things out and haven't seen all that this game has to offer. Now time to talk about what's good about this game. I would say the greatest strength is the graphics. They honestly look really great, and I've seen praise online as well saying the same thing. From the champions to the backgrounds to bosses, it does look really good. Another positive is having a PC port. For the record, the footage I'm showing in this video is from me playing the PC port version of this game. I would say the option to have it available on PC is very smart, since it allows users and players to easily stream the game. I have seen other mobile games have this model as well, and I feel like it should be a standard with bigger mobile titles to have the PC options. I don't think Raid Shadow Legends deserves credit for implementing this feature, but I think it's worth mentioning, and I think it's very nice to have a cross-platform between mobile and PC. Going back to the gameplay, with mobile RPGs, especially free-to-play or freemium games, there are a dime a dozen and many of them can be pretty simple or uninspired. However, Raid Shadow Legends actually does the RPG genre pretty well. Like I mentioned before, there's things like leveling up your champions and upgrading equipment, which is pretty standard with RPG games, but there's also a lot more options to enhance and improve your units. It can feel a bit cumbersome and tedious at times, but at least it's not too simple or basic. One thing that I wanted to mention is a mechanic that we often see with many mobile games, and that's having an energy system. Some have it like a stamina or a limited amount of tries. The annoying thing about this mechanic is that it can limit the amount of playtime attempts one can have with a mobile game. It can either force the player to wait for the game to recharge its tries, energy, stamina, whatever, or if you're impatient, pay real money to recharge it yourself. From what I noticed with most RPG mobile games, your account itself has a level up as well that recharges every time you level up as well as expands your total energy or stamina, whatever. With Raid Shadow Legends, I felt like it did a really good job with the energy system. Maybe it was more of me being a new player and constantly leveling up my account, but I think it's worth mentioning that there's no apparent cap to how much energy you can accrue by either bonuses, leveling up, etc. It seems like the surplus energy is stored in an overflow, for lack of a better word. So basically, I never felt like I had to stop playing the game due to being out of energy. So in my experience, I never had that annoyance of waiting to play later or using microtransactions to play now. One last positive thing I wanted to mention are the login bonuses. Like similar mobile games, there's daily login bonuses, which mostly include getting in-game resources, such as silver. Raid Shadow Legends not only includes daily, weekly, and monthly objectives and missions, but also daily playtime bonuses as well. With new players, I've seen additional bonuses as well, which include rare equipment and even champions. Some every 7 days and some every 30 days with limitations. Seems like there's even time-limited login bonuses, such as getting a rare champion like the Ultimate Death Knight. I think this can be very helpful for new players, especially if you struggle to summon rare champions, whether through the summon shards or drops through playing the game's dungeons. Now on to the negatives, which unfortunately I can think of a bunch of negative things to say about Raid Shadow Legends. I would say the worst thing about the game is how pushy the game is with microtransactions. I've seen this criticism before about microtransaction with Raid Shadow Legends, and I feel like it's well justified. There's just an excessive amount of bundles and such that can feel very annoying, even to the point that it feels very gross. Something that Raid Shadow Legends does that makes this feel a lot worse is that oftentimes when you go back to the Bastion or the home screen, there's a constant pop-ups of available bundles that you can buy. Such as, do you want to buy this daily bundle? Do you want to buy this weekly bundle? Do you want to buy this monthly bundle? I get it, with a game that's essentially free, it needs to make money somehow, but as a player, I feel like I'm constantly being pestered and hassled to buy something or pay money for this game. Most of these bundles and microtransactions include in-game resources such as currency and rare item, so it's not so much as a pay-to-win model, but it's more of a shortcut on convenience for players who are impatient and willing to pay real money. Again, it does feel very gross, maybe even borderline predatory, and it's a major turnoff for me. I would even say that if I had a son or daughter who played Raid Shadow Legends, I would be very cautious with access to my payment information. Another big complaint I have is how wasteful the game can be with in-game resources, specifically the game's basic currency, which is silver. For example, to upgrade your equipment it does cost silver, which isn't too bad, but as you upgrade further you have to spend more and more silver. What makes this very frustrating is that there's also the success rate for upgrading your equipment, and this rate does lessen more and more as you continue to upgrade your gear. It then comes to a point that the chance to fail is very high, and you waste so much silver in the process. It's like the game telling you, hey, do you want to upgrade your weapon? Oops, it failed, try again. Oops, it failed, try again. Oops, it failed, try again. Oops, now you're out of silver. Which you can earn more by playing the game, or you can pay real money to gain more silver. There's also other annoying ways that silver can get wasted. Wanting to use a shard to summon a champion? That also costs silver. Wanting to use resources to level up your champion in a tavern? That also costs silver. One crazy mechanic the game has that can waste a whole lot of resources is that it actually costs silver to remove equipment from a champion. So when later in the game, when you obtain better and rarer units and equipment, and you want to move that equipment around, it will definitely cost you a lot of silver, which is really frustrating. It's really baffling because with most RPGs, it doesn't cost you anything to manage equipment in this way. In the defense of Raid Shadow Legends, it's pretty easy to build up your silver again, either through playing through battles or selling equipment drops, but with how the game initially wastes so much of that silver, and even pushing that you can make in-app purchases instead, it just feels very greedy and gross. Even though the game can give you login bonuses and such for resources, the game does feel very grindy and there's a very slow drip. Like I mentioned before, there's many ways to upgrade your champions and skills. It also means more types of resources to painstakingly obtain. A small plus is not every upgrade requires silver to be used, but some resources can only be gained through limited ways, such as dungeons only available on certain days. At times it does feel extremely slow to upgrade your units, and even basic leveling up is at a snail's pace. It just turns the satisfaction of making progress into frustration of doing a bunch of cumbersome chores. Of course you can pay real money to take shortcuts, but I really don't want to pay anything to get over the game's shortcomings. One last complaint I wanted to make, although I could honestly go on and on about Raid Shadow Legends, I just don't want to make it such a long video, but my complaint is that overall the game does feel pretty generic. I said before that the game does look really good and nails a lot of the basic RPG elements, I just kind of find it meh. I honestly didn't bother much with the game's story and got bored with it quickly. If you watch my streams of Raid Shadow Legends, you can see how I check out and just how the gameplay itself on autoplay. It follows cliches such as having characters as orcs, barbarians, dragons, etc., but nothing that really stands out, especially since almost every fantasy RPGs can have the same thing. Maybe it's because it's a freemium game, but after a while, it just seems very boring and superficial. Now I want to take a moment to compare Raid Shadow Legends to another mobile free-to-play RPG that I love so much, Final Fantasy Record Keeper. Unfortunately, the global version of Record Keeper is no longer in service, but I feel like it does a lot of things right that Raid Shadow Legends gets really wrong. It's almost like comparing apples to oranges, but it feels like it's worth mentioning. Also, for the sake of time, I won't get in too in-depth with Final Fantasy Record Keeper. When comparing the gacha mechanic, Record Keeper is based on equipment drops, not units like in Raid Shadow Legends. I like this because characters don't become useless or obsolete, and besides their roles, abilities, etc., I don't toss them aside like I do in Raid. Even the gacha mechanic of equipment drops in Final Fantasy Record Keeper can lead to permanent upgrades, such as stats or abilities, so even if you get better equipment down the road, it doesn't feel like a waste from previous trials you did. Over time, Record Keeper also added additional ways to upgrade units, which also included additional in-game resources to do so. However, unlike Raid Shadow Legends, I definitely felt like Record Keeper gave better opportunities to get these new items and resources for all these new upgrades. I don't expect the game to just give them to me to make it easy, but it definitely didn't feel as frustrating or grindy like it did in Raid. It does feel like with the game's design and decisions with Raid Shadow Legend, it's made more to drain the player of resources and constantly remind you that you can pay real money for convenience and shortcuts. I really get with free-to-play mobile games that they need to make money somehow, especially if a lot of working resources went into making them, but the way Raid Shadow Legends goes about it, it just comes off a very gross, greedy, and even borderline predatory. So to wrap up this video and answer the question, is Raid Shadow Legends actually a good game? To be honest, it's actually pretty great. But is it worth your time? I would say no and wouldn't recommend it. I would go so far as to say to avoid Raid Shadow Legends altogether. It's a shame because it does have a lot of good things going for it. Visually it does look really good, the crossplay from mobile to PC is very convenient, and it has a lot of depth in improving your champions either through equipment or upgrades, so it does nail a lot of the RPG mechanics. The game does give the player a good amount of bonuses, such as daily login bonuses or playtime and missions, even giving new players rare champions, although it does seem to be more weekly and monthly if logging in every day, so the gratification is a bit delayed and also limited. The gameplay is actually fun, and I think it executed a lot of the turn-based RPG elements really well for the most part. What really brings this game down is that it clearly has a model to aggressively push microtransactions. Again, I get how companies and developers need a way to make money, especially with games that are technically free, but with the way that Raid Shadow Legends does it, it's really gross, greedy, and off-putting. The way that it's constantly shoving bundles and microtransactions in my face makes me dislike the game more and more. Also, as a side note, some of these bundles that pop up do reference viral memes, which at times does feel very cringy. The game's design choices, such as failing to upgrade equipment or pay silver to remove or change equipment, is very punishing to the player. As the player is aggressively being drained of resources, the game does remind you over and over that you can pay real money for more, and I think it just adds salt to the wounds. Even though the upgrade systems are a bit more complex and do add depth to the game, it does feel very cumbersome at times. I do feel that Raid Shadow Legends can be very slow and grindy, even forcing the player to spend so much time playing the game, even playing on different days to get the resources needed. It really delays the gratification with progress, with it feeling slow and not that rewarding. Also, I just found myself easily getting bored with the game in general. Sure, the game does look great and does turn-based RPGs really well, it just seems very generic. I really didn't pay too much attention to the game's story, and besides a few rare champions, most of the characters feel like I could find them in any other fantasy RPG game. Even while playing the game on stream, I felt like mentally checking out within an hour and just let the game play itself. Besides finding a few things cool about Raid Shadow Legends, I'm just honestly not impressed and don't plan on playing more of it. I do feel like I'm just scratching the surface and probably missed a lot from this game, but instead of it drawing me to play more of it, it just pushed me away. One last note that I wanted to make is that if they ever made a more traditional game with Raid Shadow Legends, such as a contained and limited experience, that might be more worthwhile if it meant paying one price just to buy the game. With this mobile game, it's way too clear that the main focus is to keep making money through always pushing microtransactions. So even though I honestly believe Raid Shadow Legends is a good game, how they go about it with focusing on this freemium money-making model makes it a bad experience and makes me want to look elsewhere for a turn-based RPG. Let's just say I won't be getting a Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship anytime soon, since my overall feelings is not to bother with this game at all. Thanks for watching, and let me know in the comments below what you think of Raid Shadow Legends, both good or bad. Until next time, goodbye.